Welcome to another episode of the Cooking Leprechaun. Today we are going to be making three different things. We're going to make a caramel sauce, creme brulee, and we are going to make bread pudding. These are going to be done in sections so that you can see it through all one thing and then to the other. I didn't tell you two grades. The last one we talked about was biscuits, pancakes, and muffins, and I got 100 on that one. And then the video that I didn't do was on French bread, and you're probably glad you didn't see it because that was a very frustrating assignment, but I did get 100 on that. So we're gonna go into making the starting of the creme brulee, and the first thing that we're gonna do is we have our pan already preheated. We're gonna put some heavy cream in there. And I have some vanilla bean. Instead, you can use extract instead, but I actually was able to get a hold of vanilla bean. So I'm gonna mix that in there a little bit. All right. And we're gonna bring that to a scald. And while we're waiting for that, we have 100 grams of egg yolks. And sugar, and we're going to whisk these two together and get them kind of smooth. If you leave them sit together, they'll clump up and then you're never going to get it to mix. And that looks pretty good. So we're going to set that aside and wait for the heavy cream and vanilla, and we'll be able to temper those in. All right, now we got it up to a scald, so we're going to cut that off, and we're going to temper it into our eggs. So we just want to do a little bit at a time at first, because we don't want to cook the eggs. That all in there. Now the next part we're going to do is we're going to pour this through a sieve. Put that off to the side. Then we're going to take this over here, and we're going to pour it into our ramekins. It's going to be about 3/4 of the way up. I actually think we got enough to go up to that rim right there. And that makes sure that we have even amounts in there so that they'll cook evenly as well. All right. Next thing we're going to do is put some water in it. All right, now that we got our ramekins in our pan, what we're going to do is, what I did is I moved them closer to each other just so that I could put some hot water in there. And I have to do this up 2/3 the sides of it. And the reason why I moved them over is so I don't put the water into my custard. So get it up to 2/3, and that's about right there. And then I'm going to spread them back out. Just want to give them room. And they're actually floating a little bit, so And then I'm going to cover them with some aluminum foil. And if you're using a square pan, you want to leave an inch on each side to allow steam to escape. So I'm just going to pierce it, and so I have some places for it to escape. And we don't want water to get into the custard. And we're going to carefully put it in the center. All right. And let it go in this preheated 325-degree oven. And we'll be checking on it in a little bit. Okay, so it's been about an hour, 50 minutes to an hour at 325. We did check on it a couple times. And now what we're looking at is this little thing here. And if you jiggle it a little bit, you can see it's still got some movement in it. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to set this back here and let it cool until we can actually grab a hold of the ramekins. And once we're done, once we can grab the ramekins, then we'll put them in the refrigerator for about 4 hours to cool. All right, so now we have the cooled or chilled custard, and now we're getting ready to turn it into creme brulee, which would be the actual putting on the sugar and torching it. So we're going to put a pretty good amount of sugar on there. And you just scrape the, I have this little brush to make it even on there. And the fun part, all right, you're going to start in the center, and you're going to start where you can see it melting and bubbling up, and then you're just going to start working around until you get a nice color to it. And you don't want to burn it, so then we're going to move on to the second one, let that one cool. And we'll let those cool, and it'll cause a nice little hard surface on the top of the custard, which we just bruleed it, so now it is creme brulee, and there you have it. The last part will be to taste it. Okay, now we're going to go into making the bread pudding. The first thing we're going to do is I have this large ramekin. It's a 48-ounce ramekin, and I have some cut up day-old French bread, and this is about a ½ pound, and we're just going to layer it on the bottom of the ramekin. Get it so that there's pretty good holes are filled up pretty good. I mean, obviously you want the custard to be able to go down in there, but we also want to get all this bread in there. So there we go, ½ pound of French bread. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to mix 5 eggs, ½ cup of sugar. You want to mix these a little bit first, get that so they don't clump up. All right, then I have 4 tablespoons of melted butter. I believe that's a ¼ teaspoon of salt. And 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract. And we want to mix these until they are well combined. All right, next we have is 1.5 cups of milk. And we're gonna mix this in a little bit at a time. And what we're making here is the custard that's going to go into the bread pudding. All right, there's a 1/2 cup. Try not to splash my camera girl. There's the rest of the milk. Just make sure it gets nice and stirred in there. You do get a good workout from this. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to pour it into our ramekin over top of our breadcrumbs. That, and we're going to just push these down so that they all get in there. All of them get a bath going. And then we're going to put this into the refrigerator for at least an hour to let the bread absorb the custard. And we've got the bread pudding out of the refrigerator, and as you can see, the bread has soaked up a lot of the custard. I mean, it's still a little bit loose, but it will firm up once we put it in the oven. But what we're going to do first is we're going to put a little bit of nutmeg. And some cinnamon on the top of it before we put it in the... And we're going to place it in another pan, just like what we did with the ramekins. And if you're using a pan like this, make sure that you grab the bottom of it because these are not very sturdy. But the reason why we're going to put it in there is because we're going to pour water, some hot water in it. So, be careful with the oven. Put that in there like so. And we don't want to pour the water into the ramekin, so just pour it on the side. We kind of want to get it halfway. Looks about good right there. All right, we're gonna let that bake off for about an hour or a little bit over until it gets set. So we'll see when it's done baking. Okay, let's go ahead and pull the bread pudding out. Be careful not to burn you with the water that's in there. And remember to grab the bottom again if you're using one of these tin pans. Check to see if it's set. Looks like it is. So we're going to take a scoop of this. I don't think it's set. We're into our last phase of the cooking assignment, and this is where we're going to be a little challenged. We're going to make caramel sauce, and as you know on the TV shows, one of my favorite chopped, they tend to burn it. So let's try not to burn it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put it on medium-high heat. We have 8 ounces of sugar, and then 2 ounces of water, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of lemon juice. We are just going to mix those together. And now, they say, do not touch it. So, we're going to bring this up to a boil. And this will take a little bit of time, I'm quite sure. So we'll try to speed it up for you guys a little bit. Okay, as you can see, we have it up to a boil now. We have not stirred it to this point. So I just wanted you to see what we're getting at. Now, if you start to see crystallization around the side starting to happen, you can take a pastry brush or a thin brush and just push down the sides with a little bit of water, and that'll get it from doing that, to keep it from crystallizing. So that's a little tip from the school. Okay, so as you can see now, it's starting to turn a brownish color, and that's what we want it to do. And we're going to let it caramelize just a little bit longer before we turn the heat off. Or I should say lower the heat down. So that's starting to look the color we want. We want to look at it kind of like a honey color. And so as you can see, all right, now we're going to remove it totally from the heat. And we have some heavy cream over here. What we're going to do is we're going to slowly whisk that in there. Of the cream. We might have caramel sauce. And there it was. All you have to do really is keep an eye on it and make sure that you don't let it burn. So we'll see how this tastes. We're going to put it on the bread pudding once that's finished, and we'll see how it all turns out. We'll talk to you in a little bit. All right, as you can see, I have a plate. I plated it. I don't think it's set correctly. I think that the bread separated from the custard because the bread's all on the top. There's some moist bread in the middle, and then a whole bunch of custard at the bottom. So it's kind of not the way that I wanted it. So I'll find out after getting graded for it. But as you can see, I did do the caramel sauce. So we'll put a little bit of that on there. Looks delicious. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and try this out. My daughter said no way, there was no way she was gonna eat that. So that means a lot to you. So it has a crunchy taste. The custard tastes really good. It's just didn't turn out the way I liked it. We'll see next week how the grade is. All right, bye. Okay, it's time for them to taste, so we'll see what it tastes like. Creme brulee.
Crunch. Crunch and then what? Mix?
And then eat. Jalen likes it. soon we'll get the wife to taste it. I don't know what she's doing, mixing it
Crunching.
up and
Crunching. That's good.
thumbs up.